Good morning, friends, and welcome. All the lodges all around the world meet on Sundays at different times. This lodge meets at 11 a.m. every Sunday for the presentation and discussion of a particular topic. Afterwards, it is followed by a question and answer session. On the first and third Sundays of the month, we're studying the key to Theosophy. However, January 1st, the lodge will be closed, and so we will miss the first one of those study groups. The 19th century effort put forth for the benefit of humanity from the Master's Lodge that brought out the knowledge kept in their sacred hands, brought to the attention of humanity that there is unity in nature and men, and that this unity expresses itself in brotherhood, and that brotherhood is exemplified in the way we live our lives. The tremendous gift to humanity for the first time was recorded in the writings of H.P.B., Mr. Judge, and then of course Mr. Crosby followed in their footsteps. So everything that was brought out is recorded, and Theosophy Company all over the world has made it their foremost responsibility to make sure that these books are available in their pristine condition to those who wish to obtain them. Principles of Men is given in full. Cosmogenesis and anthropogenesis is discussed in the Secret Doctrine. Today's talk follows from the cosmic aspect of that philosophy. The Declaration. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. The following is the form signed by the associates of the United Lodge of Theosophists. Being in sympathy with the purposes of this lodge, as set forth in its declaration, I hereby record my desire to be enrolled as an associate, it being understood that such association calls for no obligation on my part other than that which I myself determine. Today's talk comes from the voice of the silence. Before thou settest thy foot upon the ladder's upper rung, the ladder of the mystic sounds, thou hast to hear the voice of thy inner God in 7 manners. The first is like the nightingale's sweet voice, chanting a song of parting to its mate. The second comes as the sound of a silver cymbal of the Dhyanis, awakening the twinkling stars. The next is as the plaint melodious of the ocean sprite, imprisoned in its shell. And this is followed by the chant of Bina. The fifth-like sound of bamboo flute shrills in thine ear. It changes next into a trumpet's blast. The last vibrates like the dull rumbling of a thundercloud. The seventh swallows all the others. They die and then are heard no more. When the six are slain and at the master's feet are laid, then is the people merged into the one, becomes that one, and lives therein. And now today talk human evolution, rounds and races.
Take one and pass it.
Sure.
Welcome, friends. Today's talk will be an introduction to rounds and races, because there's so much information and so much to understand about this topic. So to begin, the reading from the Voice of the Silence talked about sounds, mystic sounds that can be heard as our consciousness is expanded and raised to subtler levels of matter and consciousness. And with that in mind, we'll take a look at evolution, because this is not the only place where our development has taken. And we could say that we're on this earth, this globe, now, but Theosophy holds that everything is sevenfold, including every planetary chain. At least in this system, in the Secret Doctrine, she refers to our Earth as the Earth chain and the lunar chain as being sevenfold, and they're actually 7 globes. And so, where do these globes exist? What do they mean? Some things we can remember before we go into exactly how it's laid out is that man's organism, we could say our bodies, our minds, are adapted in every race to its surroundings. And knowing that there are 7 globes in the chain, the occultist does not locate these spheres either outside or inside of our Earth. They are blended with our world, interpenetrating it and interpenetrated by them. They're with us, they're near us, they're within our own world, and they're objective and material to the inhabitants that are on those globes, just as ours is to us. So these other globes within the chain are invisible, but they still exist. And for other planets, they're what we see when we look into space, numerous stars and planets, is we see the globe that is consubstantial with ours. That's what we're adapted to see. But if we could raise our consciousness to the levels of these other globes, we would see that many invisible worlds exist, and that they are inhabited as thickly as our own is, and they are scattered throughout apparent space, immense in number. So the planetary chain of Earth consists of 7 companion globes. And for convenience sake, they are labeled A through G. And it's interesting that this is A, I'll try to make it bigger, C, D, E, F, G. They go in a counterclockwise direction. And the races that develop on each corresponding globe also go in this counterclockwise direction. And the human principles Madame Blavatsky puts in the Secret Doctrine that can be correlated with each globe, again, for some reason go in this counterclockwise direction. Just interesting. So there are 7 planets and 7 globes, excuse me. We happen to be on Earth on globe D. It's the most material. Evolution occurs from spirit to matter, so there is an involution of spirit into matter, each globe becoming more material and substantial until it reaches the bottom, and then it, on the ascending arc, returns to a more rarefied spiritual material. And so it looks like A and G are at the same level. They're both the most ethereal, but what she conveys in this diagram is that while they're on the same plane, so to speak, by the time we get to globe G and we've made that full circuit, the consciousness is, for that experience, a little bit higher, because really evolution goes in a spiral, and we're looking at this 2D, we sort of are getting this ring and this spiral, and we want to sort of keep it going to other levels. So, of course, evolution begins on globe A and proceeds by regular stages through B, C, D, E, etc. In the beginning, globe A was first evolved, and the life received a certain degree of development upon it. And then globe B came into existence, and the life wave removed from A and went to B. And that's what she's showing from the lunar chain to the earth chain. When this chain finished, the life wave that was on A went to A. The one that was on B went to B. The one on A didn't go to C. It didn't go to D. It has to be, at that same level. So let's keep that in mind. So it proceeds in regular order from A to G, and that is considered one round. So A to G is one. And Madame Blavatsky says that we're in the 4th round. So we have completed 3 circuits of A through G and have come halfway around the 4th. And that's where our progress is now. She says there are 7 rounds because everything is sept in it. So there are 7 globes, and we take 7 cycles to go around them. And in each round, one of our 7 principles is developed, is perfected, so that we are in the 4th round. That corresponds to the 4th human principle, which is the kamic principle, which is desire. And desire can be associated at its highest with will. And then on each globe, there are 7 races, and they don't all go exactly at the same time, because there has to be, it's just gradual. It's like when birds migrate. They don't all leave at the same day at the same hour. There's little groups detach and go, and eventually all the birds have left and have migrated elsewhere. So we have to think of it in a little bit of a natural context. So from A to B to C, the life was evolved, and it becomes onto a further stage until at the end of the 1st round, globe D was evolved and furnished the field for the very highest development attainable in that round. So the 1st round, the first tour of the life wave through the 7 globes from A to G, has been completed. The life wave passed again to globe A and commenced the 2nd round, or the 2nd tour through the chain. Without following out the details, Judge says it's enough to say that 3 such rounds have been completed and the 4th round has commenced its sweep and is still in progress, and we are now on globe D. So 3.5 times we've made this circle. Now, to simplify it, leaving out at the present moment what happened in the former 3 rounds and focusing on globe D, because that's where we're at since it's reached this point, the general statement that this globe will be exhausted and the life wave will be ready to pass from it to globe E when the 7 root races have finished their course here. Each root race is divided into 7 subraces, and this is sort of like the genealogical tree. There's the the root race, the subrace, and the family races, and so on. These divisions and subdivisions following each other and not coexisting, he says, except as an earlier race or division may survive its time and overlap a subsequent race. For instance, it's said that some of the race bodies left over from the third and fourth races are found in some of the Aboriginal peoples of Australia and some in Africa and so forth. Not all the development takes place at the same time. It's like a gradual development as those people, those egos go through the chain. Since the life wave reached globe D in this fourth round, 4 root races have run their course, and the 5th has reached its 5th subdivision, of which we are a part. This 5th subrace is said to be preparing in America for transition or transformation into the 6th subrace. And it's not entirely clear whether we in the United States belong to the 7th family of that 5th subrace or the 1st family of the 6th. It seems certain that we are near transition point based on the cycles and based on what's laid out by the masters in the secret doctrine. So the 6th and 7th subraces of the 5th run their course, and they're followed by the 6th and 7th of their subdivisions before the life wave passes from D to E. And from analogy, we may infer that 7 great races with their subraces will be necessary to complete the work of that globe, just as they will for F and for G. And it will be concluded when they finish G and the life wave is ready to commence the 5th round on globe A again. Now, there are beings of different levels of development, as was said, like some of the race bodies are still here, and some of those egos, there's an overlap, and they're still maybe at a stage other peoples have already passed through. But it is said that there are some forerunners, like Gautama Buddha is considered a 5th rounder, and he exhibits sort of the height of spiritual consciousness that we can point to, one of them. So that suggests perhaps where we're headed. We can see that there are those who are less developed and those that are more developed, and there's a great range within there. So every tour is called a round, and on each round it completes 7 root races. And if we divide them all up into the 49 subraces, there are family races, 7 of each sub, becomes 343. So this is sort of like our earthly pedigree, so to speak, if we could trace it back to figure where we are within our development on this earth. So the flow of the life wave is, Judge says, it's not continuous. It has ebb and flood, just like we see in nature. There is a rest period or pralaya after the close of each round before another is commenced. There's also a pralaya or a rest period after each globe in the round. Similarly with each race and subrace, etc., is preceded and followed by a rest. So this scheme is to bring out the general outlines and to note the distinction between the rounds on the planets and the races. In studying this subject, it should be borne in mind that while numerous pages in the secret doctrine refer to universal cosmogony and the evolution of the solar system and of our planetary chain, still the bulk of that work is devoted to the evolution of humanity on globe D in this 4th round only. So it must be remembered that the groups of monads discussed in most of the Theosophical writings are not to be taken as identical with the 7 root races, which the monadic host passes on each globe in each round. And I know it's like a lot of rounds and races, but just try to bear with it, and we'll open it up for questions and clarify. This outline of the course of evolution through 7 eternities, a Mahamanvantara, which is all 7 rounds, is, he says, Judge says, mechanical and clumsy. It's a skeleton, and we must clothe upon it with muscles and sinews by reading between the lines before its true relations and proportions can be completely understood. And the secret doctrine can throw a ray of light upon the connection of the globes of the chain. It only stands to reason that the globes which overshadow our Earth, the other ones in our chain, must be on different and superior planes, because we're at the most material. They are in, he said, references the secret doctrine, co-adonition, but not in consubstantiality with our Earth. When other worlds are mentioned, the occultist does not locate these spheres either outside or inside our Earth, for their location is nowhere in space known to and conceived of by scientists so far. They are, as it were, blended with our world, and they interpenetrate it. So to return to the egos that are on the globe D where we are now, all egos engaged in this evolution, as was said, are not in equal stages of progress, but we're varied in our development, some forward and some backwards. And the whole process is a matter of education for the soul. They go backward and forward in the various subraces which are on the earth at the same time, just as the development of our principles the soul requires, in the same way as one incarnates in family after family, in accordance with predominating qualities. But in that incarnation may bring up certain defects or generate certain causes requiring him to pass over the next life to some less progressed subrace, or for the purpose of working out defects or working off karmic causes. In this way, accurate adjustment is made. Perfect development, regularity, and roundness are all provided for. Classes of egos from time to time move up en masse, but at last no ego is left requiring the development afforded by some races, and the latter then, as physical forms, begin to die away, being inhabited only by very low orders of intelligence. And these are much... that's not good. So we evolve form appropriate to our development, and it gives the natural brain capacity, it's the expression that it needs. And but as the race ends and is ready to move on, there are the least developed, and they show the least intelligence, gradually becoming curiosities in ethnology, he says. And this is one of the great facts of racial history not yet understood by the world, that a race is both physical and spiritual. The physical body and the brain require an informing intelligence and a degree of power sufficient to keep up the exact amount of tension demanded by that sort of body. And if this is not furnished, the consequence will be that equilibrium is destroyed, followed in time by sterility of the females of the race, leading inevitably to extinction. But it doesn't mean that those egos are extinct. It means that they will, in their next life, after a rest period, get a new race body appropriate to where it is in its development. And so this is all happening primarily for us on Globe D, but we can't say that we don't know that there aren't other beings still passing on some of the other globes. That is the sort of natural analogy that should come, is that there are beings, you know, it's the life wave goes as a whole, but there's always, you know, some a little ahead and some behind. It is to be noted that when the complete 7 have all finished the 7 rounds, the entire family of egos evolving on those 7 globes commences to leave the chain forever, and the various globes composing it begin to die because the life wave transfers to another planetary chain. And that's what Theosophy says happened from the lunar chain to the Earth chain. At one time, the lunar chain was a living planet, planetary chain, and progress was made there. And when that was exhausted, the life wave came to the Earth chain. So it never arrives in a complete mass. Such coming and going is similar to the migration of birds. They go in detachments until all have migrated. The advanced portion of the life wave will arrive at Globe 7 on its last journey, the remainder following, and thus the whole wave will be at last withdrawn from globe after globe, beginning with number 1, or A, until the entire stream has passed out from the 7th, it being, as it were, the door of departure. It is evident then that Globe A, being the one to be first completely abandoned, has time to throw its energies off into space for the purpose of beginning the formation of a new first plane globe, to be ready in the new chain for the incoming rush of pilgrim souls as soon as the rest between chains is over. This is exactly what happened from the predecessors of the Earth chain, as we said, the lunar chain. For this reason, the adepts call the moon our parent, meaning the parent of our globe. And the moon may illustrate the question about obscuration and the rest period, the pralaya, because it's not obscured from our view. We can see it. And Madame Blavatsky says it is in her final pralaya and is disintegrating as quickly as nature will permit. This earth, meanwhile, absorbing her particles slowly from day to day while the great cycle of our evolution unerringly moves on. It has also been stated in letters from the adepts that the well-known planet Mars is now in obscuration. This means that the body of the planet is, as it were, sleeping in space, an analogy to our evolution from life to life. What is to sleep? What is death? To sleep, perchance to dream. So it's sleeping in space as it rolls about the sun and has no inhabitants on it such as we have on Earth. But the life wave belonging to it has passed on to the next or some other globe of its own chain. But since that wave has to return, the body of the planet does not go into pralaya but waits for a new day. Its life as a sleeping globe is maintained by a certain subtle principle which is not publicly referred to by those who know of it, but it does not permit it to die until the whole chain of which it has been traversed 7 times by the life wave belonging to it. So whether we take a chain of globes or we take the 7 root races, again, she breaks it down into different planes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 7th always being somewhat higher than the first, we get this spiral. And the human principles are at the same level with the planetary division, Globe A, first principle, Globe B, and it makes this correspondence. So the more that we can see this analogy across different 7s of our evolution, the closer we'll be to understanding it as it really is. You know, science today doesn't take it anywhere near this far, but certainly there are maybe in the subconscious of the race, there are those who, you know, have stories about aliens or something coming to this planet. It may come from a deep memory that there is some truth to a grander scheme of life on other planets and so forth. And we could say that these are the root race, and then the subrace. Again, we could go into the same order. There's 7, and then 7 subraces around each race. There's a perfect correspondence. So I'll make a couple points, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So humanity, like the globe on which it lives, will be ever tending to reassume its primeval form, that of the Dian-Chohanic host. Man tends to become a god, and then God, all caps, like every other atom in the universe. So this allows for a grand scheme of evolution. It thus becomes apparent how perfect is the analogy between the process of nature in the cosmos and in the individual man. The individual man lives through his life cycle and dies. His higher principles, corresponding in the development of a planetary chain to the cycling monads, pass into the rest state, Devachan, which corresponds to the nirvana and states of rest intervening between two chains. The man's lower principles are disintegrated in time and are used by nature again for the formation of new human principles. And the same takes place in the disintegration and formation of worlds. Analogy is the surest guide to the comprehension of the occult teachings. So when she says that the other globes exist and that they are invisible, and that they are inhabited as thickly as our own, and those of other planets are scattered throughout apparent space, immense in number, some far more material than our own, that our physical eye does not see them is no reason to disbelieve in them. Physicists can see neither their ether, atoms, nor modes of motion or forces. But if we can conceive of a world composed, for our senses, of matter still more like attenuated than the tail of a comet, hence of inhabitants in it who are as ethereal in proportion to their globe as we are in comparison to our rocky, hard-crusted earth, it's no wonder if we do not perceive them nor sense their presence or even existence. Cannot men and animals, she asks, plants and rocks be supposed to be endowed with quite a different set of senses from those we possess now? Cannot their organisms be born, developed, and exist under other laws of being than those that rule our little world? Is it absolutely necessary that every corporeal being should be clothed in coats of skin like those of ours? Corporeality, we are told, by more than one man of science, may exist under very divergent conditions. We know of discoveries of myriads of invisible lives, microbes, bacteria, down to the atomic level. I mean, new particles have been discovered since HPB's time. They are infinitesimally small and are invisible to us by virtue of their minuteness. But cannot there be, at the other pole, beings as invisible owing to the quality of their texture or matter, to its tenuity, their plane of matter? Conversely, as to the effects of cometary matter, of comets, like she said, imagine the tail of a comet. Another analogy, she says, is a ray of sunlight entering a room. It reveals in its passage myriads of tiny beings living their little life and ceasing to be, independent and heedless of whether they are perceived or not by our gross materiality. And so again of the microbes and bacteria and such like unseen beings and all the elements. We passed them during those long centuries of dreary ignorance after the lamp of knowledge and highly philosophical systems had ceased to throw bright light on history during times of bigotry. And we would fain pass by them now. And yet these lives surrounded us then as they do now. They have worked on obedient to their own laws, and it is only as they were gradually revealed by science that we've begun to take cognizance of them and of the effects produced by them. So with that, we will open it up for comments, questions, clarification, discussion.
So each circuit has a human principle.
Mm-hmm.
What are the next 3?
Well, if we look at the 7 principles, and each principle is worked on for each race. So even though we're in the 4th round, but HPV says we're in the 5th subrace, the 5th principle corresponds to mind. So the mind is being worked on as well as in the round the overall comic principle. So she says it won't become perfected till it, the 5th round comes and completes its circuit. But we work on it little bits as the cycles proceed. So in the 5th race, we're working on mind and the comic principle. In the 6th race, the 6th principle's buddhi. We'll be working on buddhi and its correspondence with the comic principle of the round as a whole, and so on. So we want to take the 7 principles of man and try and apply them to this scheme. And as she said, that the analogy is kind of like the best teacher in this circumstance. Does that help? Her?
So it's just how long of a period of time are we talking about with respect to a round of race? The reason why I ask is it seems like everything is all laid out, yet we don't think we remember any of this, and history doesn't record this. So it sounds to me like first is that's an immense period of time. That's maybe one reason why we don't get it today. And also, my follow-up question is, when we go from one round and race to the other, does actually one die out, or do they kind of blend in one after the other?
Okay, so essentially you have 2 questions. One round, is this student's understanding, is a manvantara, which I forget the exact number.
311 trillion, a billion, or something like that.
Yeah, an immense period of time.
That's a big number that I can't comprehend either one of them.
So going through all 7 rounds is the Maha Manvantara, as the student understands it. So they are immense periods of time, very difficult to even conceive of. And Theosophy says that the mind was lit up in the 3rd race, still on globe D. We're just talking about globe D here. In the 3rd race, and that was approximately 18 million years ago. So this time period definitely allows for the gradual development of all beings on that system. And we can take this up in a subsequent talk or round table, is that after a certain point, the door closes on those egos that are to take the human form. And those that are left in the animal kingdom, plant kingdom, mineral, elemental kingdom have to wait until the next Manvantara to make another advance. But it shows that no aspect that we can conceive of has been left out, but all is included, and that all is a gradual development from a state of purity and unconsciousness to self-consciousness to universal, or conscious of the all, but having gained that experience through so many lives and so many opportunities to learn with our fellow humans. A lot of time to create karma, a lot of time to work out that karma. For this student, it's somewhat overwhelming, but it's reassuring in the sense that everything's been provided for. In daily life, there can be like the struggle to make it, but this shows us that everything has been provided for, and that there's time to relax and focus on spiritual things, because that's what's directing our evolution. And if we ignore it, it'll perhaps delay us, but the life wave pushes on, and it's just sort of reassuring that we have time to address these things, these questions of where we are, where we're headed, and so forth. And then your second question was the races. They intermingle to some degree. There are different, perhaps some subraces are still on the planet, still on the globe now, that pertain to prior root races. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're advanced for the egos, that the wave that they're a part of, the family race or the subrace that they're a part of, yet they're not as developed as maybe most of the humanity on Earth today. But so it's not like there's a beginning and a exact end. There's a ebb and flood, as was said, and there's an intermingling. But generally speaking,
Overlap.
So what you're saying is
overlap. There's one.
Yeah, there's a link which maybe is almost indescribable among all this. Yes, everything's provided for, but by the same token, we have an effect on what's coming next, if I understand it correctly. So that's how I ask you these questions. That kind of one thing leads into the other.
It's true.
Based on what we need.
Do you want to comment on that?
No, I have a
Oh,
question.
okay. All right. I'll comment, and then we'll take your question. Is that our level of consciousness, our will, our development through these stages does affect how we continue. It affects the future. So Madame Blavatsky says that at first there's natural impulse, and then once we get to the self-conscious stage, there's self-induced and self-devised effort that is required. One can't just be carried by the life wave, or one could get left behind, so to speak, and that's like more like an exception than the general rule, but there's always exceptions to the rule. But generally, yes, the impetus of our culture, our development on this globe and this round and this race and this family race, subrace and family race, we also know that we can correspond it with like the golden age, the silver age, the bronze, and the iron, and that we are just entering the iron age, the Kali Yuga, which is 432,000 years approximately, and we've only completed about 5,100. So we are at a point of rapid materiality, and things seem to accelerate as it goes, as it rounds the corner, if we could sort of visualize it in a physical sense, and that we need all our faculties to bear on our development. We can't just let it go and just float along with the life wave. But we can be rest assured that, like a river always flows downstream to the ocean, that we are all on this path together, trying to figure it out and help each other. I think we should probably bring it to that universal type of level. We're all from the same source. We're brothers and sisters. We're in fact this sparks of the one fire. So the karma of each is the karma of all.
I'll make a comment with that, but there are streams of spiritual growth, physical growth, and mental growth, and they are not all correspondent with one another. So if we're rising in spirituality, it does not mean we're rising in mentality or physicality. I don't know how those things correspond, but she says sometimes they develop one at a time and sometimes concurrently. So that's one consideration.
That's a great point. Like she said that during the time she lived, at the last 100 years of the century, that there was, even in that minute cycle of a few hundred, 100 years, that there was an increase in psychism. And so that came to the forefront, even though, we should be working on mind and so forth. There are cycles within cycles. And this scheme provides for the development of all the principles, but one may be accentuated at any one time.
May I ask one question?
Sure.
Somewhere she makes the comment that those branchlets, branches and branchlets, have thousands of years. I think she gives the Jewish nation as an example. And she says that they have been in existence for 8,000–9,000 years. They're one of the younger branchlets of humanity. But then she says, if we are going to go further on, each branchlet has to carry on with the task, with its duty assigned to it, and that no one can escape from it, that if you don't do it, it doesn't mean that it's going to survive, that the branchlet will just disappear from the total effort made by humanity moving forward. Did you come across something like that?
In general, I came across that in somewhat general, but not specifically.
Yeah, that's the only specific thing I have seen in the Secret Doctrine, the 8,000 years.
I have a question. Analog to on the lines of what Tunjai mentioned about that someone could theoretically be very enlightened, perhaps in the spiritual sense, but not so much on mental or other senses. I wanted to ask about two prominent figures in spirituality: Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, and to some extent Mahatma Gandhi. Both, to my understanding, have something in common that's actually not too positive, and it's that both were married and had children, and literally left their romantic partners and their children behind to focus on their what they felt was their calling and mission in life. In Buddha's life, it was to pursue enlightenment. In the case of Gandhi, was his no-violence movement. But to my knowledge, in the case of Gandhi, it led to his children to resent him. And I've always pondered how come it's possible that so much depth and really, really profound philosophical ideas came from these two individuals, despite them the foundings from their lives having had this really deep controversial matter, which I personally don't agree with, by the way, with leaving children behind.
Neither do I.
So,
No such thing occurred.
how can we reconcile that?
Yeah. Just asking. I'm not expecting the be-all answer, but just asking for the sake of pondering. Yeah.
Yeah, the student thinks it's a great point because it doesn't leave out, it takes into view all aspects. And from this student's understanding, maybe their duty in life was to a greater family of humanity, although compassion towards each one would suggest not leaving behind family members. Not knowing all the intimate details, if they visited each other or how close they were, no one being is absolutely perfect.
I agree.
And especially on a level that we are, such that there is good and evil are two sides of the same coin. It's not that there is anything that is 100% purely good. There's always like a shadow side. There's nothing that's 100% purely evil either. Like, you know, some horrible despots in history loved their children and were sensitive and fond and many other good qualities. So Theosophy doesn't really assign good or bad. All is an interaction of the qualities in nature. And the qualities are sattva, rajas, and tamas, as brought out in the Bhagavad Gita. And it's always a mixture. It's not actually even just two sides, good and bad. That's just a gross simplification. But we have to look at it as a balancing of factors within this huge scheme of development. And as such, we can be aware, but probably should refrain from judgment, just because it's difficult to know what anyone would do in a circumstance until one is in that circumstance, and one can surprise oneself. Qualities or desires or duty will come up from depths we didn't know we had when tested. So it seems that we have to just take it in a general global context of perhaps the Buddha or Gandhi's mission for duty for that life was to the greater independence of a nation, or definitely outlining a path towards enlightenment that generations can rely on. So yeah, point well taken. It's there's always a mixture until the seventh family race of the seventh subrace of the seventh root race of the seventh round of globe G will things have been perfected, and even then there will be perhaps a transference to another chain of development that's even higher, and it just boggles the mind to even conceive of it.
But let us also remind ourselves that love is universal, and human love is universal at its core, and proximity is not necessary. How do we know what those individuals did with their families, that they did not send love to them continuously, for instance?
Yeah,
And just because your kids resent you doesn't mean you're doing it wrong.
Good point. They're bound to have a bone to pick.
One little comment I would like to make on all this. We're told in the Voice that the spiritual level, if that spiritual level, if we call there, it throws all difficulty asunder. So it tells us over and over again that if we continue on this psychic road without the spirituality involved, which is that so many of us do it now, think that it's wonderful to get their degree in college and whatever, which is wonderful, but it's more to it than that. Than a quick little comment.
Certainly, as one of the prior questions said, that magnanimity could be disguised. It could be disguised by a selfishness. It really takes a true thinking person to try and figure it out on all the different levels that we have of our being is complex. Our aspirations are complex. From many lives, we don't know what desires what the karma associated that makes it. It's associated to the body we're in, a class of karma. So it's difficult to know until we get to a higher level where beings beyond us, like HPB, the Adepts, the Mahatmas, say that we can get the view as if from a mountaintop and understand what our past lives were, what that lesson meant, how we should move forward.
One little quick comment and I'll let go. We also, if we have to assume the position in order to get there, comment being made that the, you know, from a spiritual level, universal thinking, which is way from what a lot of us do today.
And like the Gita, do our duty, do our best to do our duty, and don't be too attached to the results.
Live in the moment.
Sandra?
I have two thoughts. I had only one, but that was a very good question. And I kept thinking, how can it be? And I thought that Christ and Buddha done the same in a way. They walked away from the sort of earthly life, from family, from anything mundane. And their stories very much correlate. Like the birth of Buddha is very similar to birth of Christ. There are wise men, and in a way the story got rewritten and retold. Can it be that it is a symbol? It's maybe not a real historical fact. Maybe it is a symbol of having to sacrifice the earthly life for the spiritual life, that you cannot do both.
Absolutely, well said.
The other thought that, I don't know even what I'm trying to say with it, but it's a question in my mind. As you said that everything is provided and the whole order looked so orderly, I was thinking of the last few days of extreme cold, because I was running like 24/7 trying to take care of my animals. Because what was usually provided suddenly broke down. The water froze, I have to break that water. The ice was, the ground was icy, they couldn't get to the food. They needed coats, and there were like hundreds of things. And I kept running to make sure everything runs. And I was thinking, what is their perception of all of this? They're probably thinking there is some divine order, and it will happen. That in any case, no matter what, if the ice, if the water frozen, they will just cry a little, their sort of prayer, and eventually I'll come and I'll make it happen. But then I thought, what looks so permanent and orderly to them, that I will always appear, and food and water and warmth will be there somehow. Actually, if I'm stuck somewhere on a plane or something happens to me, there'll be a major breakdown. It will not happen. And I was wondering, sort of, as below, so above. We think that the order will be there, that everything, that the harvest will be there, that the sunlight will be there, that it will continue in an orderly fashion. But what if there are glitches?
There have been glitches, actually, and the Secret Doctrine in Anthropogenesis discusses how, human beings are divine. We have our physical body, material, and principles are a gift from the lunar pitris, and mind and the higher from the solar pitris. And at the commencement of this round on Globe D, there was the first race was very ethereal. The second race was produced unconsciously by the first race. And some of the higher beings that were to incarnate to become the future nursery of humanity and to impress withheld. And some of the bodies were incarnated in fully. Some were given only a spark, and some were not at all. And then that has been referred to in the Secret Doctrine as the sin of the mindless. Those forms were not lit up by mind, and even though they were of human quality, they were not, they had no mind, and therefore intermixed with animals and created monsters, so to speak, and that was like a failure. It was a glitch, and so there are some egos in the mix that are in the bodies of the great apes, and they are the very last of the human kingdom. They're really not in the animal kingdom. They're in the human kingdom, but we can see that they're going extinct. They don't have the capacity or all the different things that we have. So within this grand history, there are chapters where there are glitches, where there are wars between the forces of good and the forces of materiality that are holding back, that are sort of taking us off the path. There are forces pulling us. So to your point, there are glitches, and the secret doctrine does spell some of them out and what it means. And because everyone's affected by everyone else's karma, it's not like those things happen in isolation. That may be part of the reason that we're called laggards, that we should be further in our development, but we're still trapped in like a psychic, more psychic state than perhaps we should be at this point in our development, and we should be more monastic and waking that up. So everything does have its cause and its effect. Okay, and then here and then. Go ahead.
Going back to your comments on Mars and how the life wave is leaving that planet, there's a lot of discussion about colonizing Mars, and I'm curious, what would be the consequences if Theosophy talks about that at all? If we inhabit other planets, or if it's possible, what would happen with our evolution?
This student has thought about it a little too, and it seems that it is, especially with the technology that's coming out and the way things are going, it seems that it could be possible. But this theory says that the life in Mars is asleep. What we're seeing is sort of, it's in a prolaic state, a rest state. When it awakens on that plane, we see it, so it's consubstantial with D, because that's where we are. What does that awakening mean? Is that going to be cataclysms? Is that going to be a change in the conditions of the planet, physical and psychically and spiritually, that would render it uninhabitable? The student doesn't really know. It doesn't seem that, I don't know how far that line could go. But it seems that at least science fiction has brought it to a level where it's very symbolic and suggestive of ourselves and what we would do, where we're at in our development when faced with some of these big ethical questions, like if we do colonize Mars, do we try and make it green? Do we change it to suit ourselves? If that's even possible, I don't know. Does that mean we can destroy Earth because we have another safe place to go? I mean, it's definitely interesting to think about, and I think as a race we're going to start, we already have started with these questions. But it it seems like that the life wave that is on the Mars planet, the bodies there are suited to the conditions that it represents, and that we can't fulfill our destiny there. Doesn't mean maybe we go over there for, I don't know, 20,000, I don't know.
The secret doctrine says that the life forms on those planets are far superior to Earth. She says they cannot be compared to this missile mud, is what she calls our Earth. The intelligences, even in Venus, are so much superior to this one, and that Venus has just come out of obscuration, and in the future generation it's going to have a tremendous influence on humanity. Mars is a totally different planet than Earth, and she says never to apply this philosophy to the other planets of the system.
This relates to the Earth chain.
But what I wanted to say about the comment that Sandra made is that when one has undertaken to walk on the path, it's the inner self that guides the individuality. In other words, the individuality is in charge. The persona is not in charge of anything. It simply follows what the inner life is showing that needs to be done. This is for Gandhi, because Gandhi said, when the inner voice is quiet, so is my mouth. Well, that should tell us something. But we can't judge them by looking at them from outside in, because their path is demanded by the inner light. In other words, the inner life shows you what you need to do. You look out and you see what you need to do. You go out, you do it, you come back. You're in the world, but you're not of it. That's the difference there.
And it might be easier to perceive those spheres that are interpenetrating ours, perhaps, than trying to figure out what's going on Mars, for example, a totally different chain.
Our consciousness is on the physical plane here. It does not correspond with the other ones on the chain.
Right. She says that the spheres, the other globes, are blended with our world, interpenetrating and interpenetrated. And they are with us, near us, and within our own world.
But their
but not
substance is
objective
different.
to us.
The substance of them are different. They're in coordination, they roll together, but their substance is refined.
If one's consciousness is attuned to a different level of substance, one, we assume, would be able to perceive the beings there. Okay, so thank you so much for your questions and comments and an interesting discussion on this introduction to human evolution, rounds and races. Next week is Christmas, and it's season of regeneration. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you next week.